welcome to truthbox.tv, and this is our second interview from Warminster. I'm with Ciaran O'Keefe. Ciaran, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much.
Now, it's great to finally meet you, because obviously we've all seen you on TV doing your stuff, but just had a very interesting chat in the car on the way down here about some of the things you're doing. And it fascinates me because some of my own research and my background seems to go parallel with yours. So first off, for those that don't know you abroad, perhaps in America, that are watching the programme, give us a bit of a background on you and how you got to where you are.
I think people only see one side of me when they see the TV side. That's very much playing a role as an investigator, but my day job is ultimately as a parapsychologist at a university. I've got a research associate position at Toulouse University, and my background is initially in psychology, and then did a master's in investigative psychology, which is psychological assistance for criminal investigations. As part of that, I did a thesis on psychic criminology and actually tested psychic detectives. And from that, was then offered the opportunity to do a parapsychology PhD, where I focused on testing mediums and psychics, what we call in parapsychology special claimants. And all through this period, I was fascinated by haunting experiences. Even as a teenager, I'd been involved in haunting investigations, and so it was only natural as a parapsychologist to get involved in haunting experiences, kind of understand the psychology and the environmental side of haunting experiences. And that's where I am today.
Now, with regards to the research on mediums, this is something I've done myself as well. What's your view on mediums generally? Do you think that they are gifted? Do you think some are gifted? Do you think they're all charlatans? What's your view overall of the medium per se?
Well, I'm open-minded to the possibility. You know, I think the process involved is akin to telepathy. Mediums at the end of the day are talking about communicating with the dead, and it is that similar sort of process. And as parapsychologists, we're very much involved in research thinking that telepathy is a possible process. So I am open-minded. In terms of my interaction with mediums, I would say that we're dealing with a minority who are deliberately fraudulent and who are out, just to get money and take advantage of people. The majority genuinely believe that they have an ability. In my experience, testing them and kind of interacting and even getting one-on-one readings, that's where the difficulty is. Even though they genuinely believe they have an ability, I've still yet to find a medium that I would be impressed by and say they are actually communicating with the dead.
Now, on the TV shows you've done, you've worked with quite a few of these mediums, and there are lots of stories on the internet about some of the things that have gone on. How good would you say the mediums were you work with on TV?
They're very good television mediums, which is quite a diplomatic answer. To be fair to them, I think that I'm not seeing them in their natural environment. So I've had better interaction and learnt a lot more off camera. When they're on camera, I think they're in a pressured situation because, of course, they're there, whether it's leading an investigation or when I've done Jane Goldman Investigates, it's sitting and doing one-on-one readings. When the camera goes on and the director asks, to start and it's action, there's pressure on the medium to perform. To give a reading, there's pressure on the medium to get information about a haunted environment. Now, it takes a very, very courageous medium to actually sit there and go, I'm not getting anything, because there's an entire TV crew standing behind that camera and ultimately then thousands of people watching at home, and that's a lot of pressure for a medium to go, I'm just not getting anything. So that's what I mean by it's not a natural environment, because I think those mediums that I've worked with, they do feel that pressure and they have to come up with something. And some of the time it might be real, some of the time it might be just the pressure. They use cold reading techniques or they just make it up.
Now, some time ago, Dr Vic Tandy at Coventry University came up with the theory that infrasound was responsible for a lot of what we see out of the corner of our eyes, ghost-type sightings, and he put this down to an air conditioning unit at the time and a frequency of infrasound. Now, you've done some work on this as well, haven't you?
Yes, Vic Tandy, I have a lot of respect for him. Unfortunately, he's passed away now in the midst of his infrasound research. He focused on something called the Tandy band. It's the best way of phrasing it. 18.9 hertz. And everything below 20 hertz is infrasound. We can't hear it, but we can feel it in a way. I mean, it's still the same process in terms of actually getting the sound through our ears, but there's no note, as it were. And I've got a PhD student, Steve Parsons, who we've been working on infrasound for a number of different years. And basically disproving Vic's hypothesis. At the end of the day, he was focused on one particular frequency, but I think it's not clear to the general public that when you visit any location, let alone a haunted location, there is infrasound around us all the time, whether it's caused by heavy traffic or, in Vic's case, air conditioning units, or even thunder. There could be a number of different natural sources to that. And yeah, in terms of doing accurate surveys of haunted and non-haunted locations, we find that there is always infrasound. So we know in the lab infrasound can cause similar experiences to haunting experiences, sense of presence, kind of an odd feeling in the stomach, those sort of things. But it might only be a contributing factor. I think people would already have the experience in a haunted location, and maybe infrasound intensifies it, but I don't think it's solely responsible for the experience at all.
Now, I'm one of the lucky few that spent a couple of days and nights in the Tower of London investigating it. You're one of the lucky few that's been in Hampton Court Palace. Now, what was that one like?
Hampton Court Palace, fantastic, and easily one of my favourite locations to investigate. I was there with a research team from University of Hertfordshire, led by Professor Richard Wiseman, and that was in 2000. And we spent a number of weeks there. It's a hard life being an academic and having to live in Hampton Court Palace, but we survived. And we were testing the idea of suggestion. Two areas, Wolsey's Closet and the Haunted Gallery, and ultimately saying to some people, the haunted area is not the haunted gallery. The real area that you want to focus on is a different area, another part of the palace. And they're saying to other people, no, it's called the haunted gallery for a reason, it's genuinely haunted. Therefore, kind of playing with the idea of suggestion. And could that be responsible for people's experiences? What we found was that it was not a factor, is that people were still having experiences, even if we didn't throw in the suggestion. And these are people that didn't have knowledge about Hampton Court Palace, hadn't heard the stories, and hadn't, at that point, gone on any tours of the place. So it was a fascinating study, and although as a psychologist I think suggestion is very, very powerful, we're ultimately showing, well, it doesn't have to be there for people to have experiences.
Absolutely. Well, I've always said in all of my work that the paranormal is merely that science can't yet currently explain as normal. And it's a way of telling people not to be afraid of it. And for scientists, I always say that scientists should say as currently understood, because they make this terrible mistake of saying, no, that can't happen, and then having to apologise the next day for that same statement. So I sort of take the view that we're always learning. You know, every single day something new comes up. Now, Hampton Court, I mean, I wish I could have stayed that long in the Tower of London, I have to say. I love that investigation for the same reasons. But in Hampton Court, there's a very famous piece of ghost footage, which was the barn doors clip, which I'm sure you're aware of. What did you think of that particular clip?
In terms of this figure walking out of the doors, ultimately the footage has been debunked. However, as with a lot of the evidence that you're presented with in haunting cases, having built up a close relationship with the security and various members of the staff, the security especially were a little frustrated that was the footage that got released and ultimately the main press about it, because they were reporting doors opening in that particular corridor for unknown reasons. And it was for several weeks leading up to that footage being caught, and for several weeks after the footage had been caught. And it was that kind of scared them or got them interested in it, these unexplained doors opening, to the point where security would be walking around the corridor, or walking around the corner into that corridor, and then stop because the door opened of its own accord. And ultimately, I think the footage is a setup, and there's already been some good analysis done on it to show that it is fake. But it was a joke at the time, which played on this idea that there was actually something real going on. But it's a moment that's lost. The phenomena doesn't happen anymore, and so we can't really assess it.
Now, just catching up to date, what are you working on at the moment?
A number of different things. I'm still involved in haunting investigations, very much in the field. I'm looking a little bit more at using my master's knowledge in terms of investigative psychology and applying that to haunting investigations. So, I've been trained in interviewing techniques, in criminal investigations, and I think that sort of technique is very useful for eyewitnesses in haunting investigations. In addition to that, using psychological profiling and geographic profiling and applying that to some paranormal cases. But also I've been kind of veering off a little bit and got involved in what I like to term Christian parapsychology, which is phenomena like stigmata, exorcism, but also been involved in some miracle research recently.
Well, that's very interesting. Now, what are you going to be talking about this weekend here at Warminster?
When I was originally asked to come to Warminster, I was given a very vague remit and just told, well, you can talk about anything, but then asked if I could talk about some of my research. So tomorrow I will be chatting about parapsychology, basically breaking down the myths, telling people that parapsychologists are not Ghostbusters, simple as that, and talk about what parapsychology is, what some of the research is that goes on. Also talk about parapsychologists' approach to haunting experiences, some of the findings that we've discussed here in this interview, and then lead on to some of the psychic criminology work that I've been covering, and also some work that I've been doing looking at miracle blood, which I did some research in Madrid and Ravello in Italy.
Well, I have to say, on your comment about Ghostbusters, I was actually asked that question once, are you a Ghostbuster? And I actually answered them by saying, I don't think I've ever busted a ghost in my life. Ciaran, it's been a delight to talk to you, and good luck for the talk tomorrow.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.